please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
I'll start, with a key question really that we're addressing through this entire conference, and that is making Maharashtra into a $1 trillion economy from, the $400 billion economy that it currently already is. Mr. Vanchu, if I could start with you. What do you think will propel the growth of Maharashtra, the infrastructure-led growth of Maharashtra to get to that target $1 trillion mark?
Thanks, Ritu. So I would say there's a few things. I mean, I think we've all been talking about infrastructure and how critical that is to enable really any growth in the economy, to get to that level. So, starting with the basic infrastructure needs, and essentially to be able to provide productive employment of the population that will generate this growth. So I think all the things that we talked about in terms of airports, transport, housing, power generation, the ability to move people efficiently, I think those are absolutely critical needs to enable this kind of growth.
All right, so, fairly well-rounded. We need growth on all of those fronts. Mr. Obale, would you like to come in on that? A blanket question, what are some of the critical areas we need to address to get to this $1 trillion economy target?
Maharashtra is currently growing at around 7.5% annually. And the pace will have to be at least about 100 basis points above what it currently is. Yes. So if that is the case, and what does economic growth really mean? Economic growth essentially is making the economy more productive. Essentially, it means that you will have to not only invest a huge amount of money, but you will have to make investment in very, very productive classes. So you just cannot, like for example, you cannot do a large infrastructure project in sub-Saharan Africa and expect that can return. Similarly, here also, you'll have to make very targeted investments in order to achieve higher pace of economic growth. So that's one aspect, making investments. The second is that we have significant amount of investments that's already happened. How do you make that investment productive is also very important. Just to give a very small example of Mumbai itself. Mumbai has enormous network of roads, which is highly congested. So today, the productive capacity of the road itself is just about 50%. How you manage the roads and enhance the existing capacity of the roads is also something that we need to think in addition to making new investments in infrastructure.
All right. Before I come to specific projects in Maharashtra, which of course have been discussed, I'd like to talk about one, a project that is of course, available for India, which itself will provide a big push to the infrastructure growth in Maharashtra, and that is the Bharatmala project that has been recently announced. Now, 44 economic corridors, of those 44 economic corridors that are part of this project, 12 will pass through Maharashtra. Perhaps if we could have a word from you, what sort of opportunity does this provide for the state, and what does it mean in terms of the multiplier effects that it could have on other logistics sectors, etc.?
Maharashtra is a very promising state, I believe. So there are so gigantic needs in every infrastructure subsectors. I think infrastructure itself has a very strong impact for the job creation and so on, for the targeting of the 1 trillion economic society. And at the same time, I'd like to highlight the importance of the function of the infrastructure to invite more investment. And from this point of view, maybe road, power, water, there are still so gigantic needs to be addressed. And here I'm showing the thinking path of JICA. We are targeting economic development like a 1 trillion economic society. And for that purpose, public side cannot cover everything. So how to encourage private sector's activities? This is the key. From this point of view, infrastructure development should propel the further investment. Without the power, without load, who can decide the investment? This is the point. So again, I say, I'd like to sum up 2 points. One, infrastructure itself is very important for the economic boosting. And second, two, through the economic infrastructure development, we'd like to attract more investment. And for your questions, I believe road, transportation, power, water, these are the very important points we'd like to discuss further.
Mr. Talu, if I could bring you in, you've been an investor in Maharashtra as a foreign investor. How has been your experience working with the state government, whether it's policy initiatives, whether it is, land-related rules? How easy has it been to do business in Maharashtra?
One couple of words about the infrastructure actually development. I wanted to say infrastructures, it takes time to develop infrastructure. It doesn't happen in 6 months or 12 months. You know, these projects are like 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 8 years, depends on the size of the project. So it actually needs, in general, I'm talking in the world, it needs continuity, especially in the political arena. The leaders should be supporting the same projects. There are many parts of the world, there are hiccups and the projects stop. But I think you're very lucky now in India. You have a very, 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 very strong leadership coming from the Prime Minister all the way down to the Maharashtra Chief Minister level. And the people I met are very competent, so I'm very happy here. One of the reasons why we are here working. Otherwise, it's difficult to work and frustrating if you don't have strong management. This is very critical. And, but there are challenges, yes, of course, because Mumbai is a very old city. Building infrastructure in Mumbai is not easy. And also India is going through transformation. For example, GST, in the middle of the project, you know, a new taxing system comes, and now everybody is trying to figure out, I mean, they are finding ways.
Also, GST has also brought about a big opportunity.
It's an opportunity.
For the infrastructure
it has to be done.
Yeah.
It has to be done, but that is an opportunity, but it's also a challenge that, you know,
Definitely.
people are trying to figure out how to pay this.
Yeah.
For example, about Mumbai, well, there are challenges. There are tree cutting permits. It takes time. Removal of the current utilities. It takes time, and sometimes you go down and you really don't know what's under, or you know what is on the plans doesn't show the reality. This is same everywhere in the world. It's an old city.
All right. Mr. Obale, if you'd also like to comment on that. I mean, typically when you have to start a project, you know, in a state of Maharashtra, how many clearances, how many different agencies and authorities do you have to go through, and how easy or nightmarish is this entire process?
Well, I can assure you that it was quite nightmarish, and the number of permits that you have to obtain is significantly large. I don't even actually, I can't even count the numbers, but I must tell you that in the last 3 years, I've seen a significant change. As a result of that, I think the governments have now been very, very proactive in terms of approvals. You've also seen it has resulted into several infrastructure projects which were stuck for a very long time, have now taken off. So that has been a major, but I think there's one area that I would just like to point out, and I think for that, I think we need to get some kind of political consensus amongst various political parties, particularly infrastructure projects. Infrastructure projects, somebody like us who invests a huge amount of money upfront in infrastructure projects, if project gets stalled, it's a huge setback for the project and for the promoters. So getting political consensus around developing infrastructure, because when you start a road project or after you complete it, sometimes somebody would come and stall the collection of tolls, for example. So that could be an issue. Some of the PPPs that got terminated, I think, is something that can scare off the investors. I think it would be useful to get all political parties aligned to see that the infrastructure projects are not stalled. So while we've seen several initiatives that have happened on the administrative levels in terms of reducing the number of clearances, even environmental clearances now have been streamlined. But I think on the political side, I think there's still some work needs to be done in terms of getting all parties to have an alliance in terms of making infrastructure development of the country a national priority agenda beyond all political imperatives.
Vishal, do you think in the last 3 years things have significantly changed on the ground? I mean, is it easier for you to do business here in Maharashtra, not just in the city of Mumbai?
You know, we've had two experiences. I would say one that is fairly significant, where we made the investment in Chakan in Pune. And I'll relate this back actually to one of the questions you asked in terms of, you know, what's important for driving the economy to the $1 trillion economy. And we talked about basic infrastructure, but Make in India is extremely important, right? So it has to have a manufacturing base, you know, it has to move from a services-based economy. So we decided to invest in a factory in Pune. It was inaugurated, as I mentioned, in 2015. The factory was operational in under 2 years. This is a state-of-the-art factory. We manufacture equipment across all our businesses. So it's unique in the sense that it's actually what we call a multimodal. It houses all of the technologies of GE. And it is a world-class facility. We've got a lot of support from the government also in working around skilling because state-of-the-art labor, effective labor was very important for us in the manufacturing sector. So I would say from that experience, we came away very positive.
Mr. Sakamoto, you've had a lot of experience working with various states, within India, your investments pan-India. Where have you found, in terms of policy initiatives or in terms of support for the government, which state in India has been the best for you in terms of being investor-friendly?
Hi, thank you very much. I'm covering all Indian states, so I cannot, I should be very fair.
In your experience.
Yeah, based on our experience, maybe there might be some, how can I say, specific idea of JICA to make a concentration or selection. And from this point of view, because India is a very huge country, and there are 29 states, and among them, maybe I cannot just point out one or two, but we are now setting several important areas we're very enthusiastic to cooperate. One is the DMIC.
Yeah.
Delhi Mumbai Industrial Corridor.
Yeah.
Another one is the CBIC, Chennai Bengaluru Industrial Corridor. In order to avoid any, how can I say, wide but shallow support, we'd like to look into those areas' future collaboration. And from this point of view, Maharashtra, Mumbai is, of course, one of the part of the DMIC area. So from this point of view, again, I say Maharashtra is very potential and promising, I think. But coming back to your previous question, what are issues or program for the infrastructure project in Maharashtra? Maybe land acquisition and restoration plan for the project affected people. These are the very headache issues, I think. Of course, we are positive because of the very strong leadership of the higher dignitaries of the Maharashtra government, like Mr. Madan, head of the MMRDA. I believe we can have a very positive way, but still, especially in the very old town like Mumbai, very congested town in Mumbai, land acquisition and restoration plan might be the challenges we have to tackle.
I think earlier you also referred to the fact that not just investment in new projects is critical, it's also important to upgrade the existing infrastructure. What are the opportunities for companies like you in that space in the state of Maharashtra?
The several highway projects, you talked about Bharatmala projects, the national highway projects that are coming up, the expressway that is being now talked about in Maharashtra from Mumbai to Nagpur, then the industrial townships that are going to come around each of these nodes. There are huge opportunities for public and private sector participation in this area. So I think in order to drive efficiencies, I think the model of public-private partnership essentially identify projects in which there's a possibility of the private sector investment happening, and where it's not possible for the government to invest in those projects, I think it should be left to the private sector. And where the private sector it's not possible for the private sector to participate because of either the risks inherent in those projects or the returns not being there, I think we can probably look at the government participation in these projects. So I think we need to have a synergy between purely government participation and public-private partnerships in order to drive this agenda.
When you're awarding projects in India, is the very idea of awarding a project to the lowest bidder, an ideal practice, given that sometimes that may lead to, very unreasonable bids being accepted, and therefore the person being awarded the contract really cutting back on costs to meet, the value that he's quoting at the time of bidding. Do you think that approach of selecting the lowest bidder itself is flawed?
I personally feel yes. I think the good thing about this is that it infuses a lot of transparency in it. So it only is a single point by which you can choose the bidder. But I think the details, of course, are in terms of what kind of pre-qualification you have. So you need to get the right kind of people on the table and then ask them to compete amongst themselves in order to bid and win. So that's one part. I don't think we can really do away with, and I don't think the system within the government, the vigilance and all the inquiries that go on, if at all you award a project to, say, L2, for example, it's going to work. It's going to really scare away a lot of people. And I don't even think from somebody like us, we would like to compete and become L1 in order to win. But playing field should be level. So, for example, in certain cases, for example, when we compete, there are certain imports which are happening which might probably get a 40% subsidy. If that happens, then I'm not in a position to compete in the Indian market. So I think, therefore, we need to look at level playing field for me to compete. But I think the standard has to be in terms of price. Because if at all you compromise that, then all kinds of forces will start playing in order to see that projects, after they are won, are then won by certain specific people. So I'm personally all in favor of going for L1, but having a good pre-qualification criteria and having a level playing field.
When you're implementing projects, how easy or difficult is it to get financing in India, and what is your preferred method of raising money for infrastructure projects? I mean, would you go to a private equity player than go to a bank?
It really depends, I would say, Ritu, by sector. So I'd say broadly, I would say I'll make a comment on financing. There's certain sectors which are more challenged than others, right? So certain sectors, it's easier to get financing. We use a lot of export credit agencies just based on the fact that, based on the source of technology, where the rates are attractive. So it's a combination of local plus export credit agency financing. But I mean, it is the lifeblood of, getting projects done. So it is still, I would say, work to be done on cleaning up the NPAs in the country. That is clearly an issue. And I think unless that is done, the government's taking steps to do that. That will really free up the capital structure within the country.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for this session, the Infrastructure-Led Growth in Maharashtra.